Ubisoft has delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows to February of 2025, and this news comes with a lot of other news that paints a very, very bad picture for the company. There's been a lot happening, and this decision in itself comes with a lot of other changes. At the minimum, guarantee that Ubisoft moving forward is not the Ubisoft that we've come to know in recent years. Ubisoft is now listening to its customers and at least pretending to implement changes regarding that. So voting with our wallets has worked. They're up against the ropes and having to change. There's also a very high chance that Ubisoft will just no longer be, that it will change ownership, go through dramatic changes, or just close. And there is also another chance somewhere stranded in the ocean that they come back from this situation stronger, making meaningful changes, and somehow bounce back. That is a very small chance right now, by the way, but it is worth mentioning. And as you can imagine, there's quite a bit going on. This is the third video I record on this because the news kept breaking. But we're going to dig into all of it because I think that the consequences of this is something that not a lot of people realize. By the way, hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. Let's get into it. Now, I'm going to give you the full details first and then explain everything piece by piece. In what seems to be an incredibly rushed and last-minute decision, Ubisoft has delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows to February 14th of 2025 with significant changes, including that it is now day one on Steam, it no longer has a season pass or an early access period, they have cancelled all existing pre-orders for the game, and they are now giving everybody who pre-orders it the first expansion for free. The reason for this seems to be that Assassin's Creed Shadows is lacking polish, and in words of Ubisoft, these are not my words, similar to the lack of polish in Star Wars Outlaws, which, by the way, Ubisoft has confirmed did not as well as they hoped in sales. We kind of knew that from analysts before, but now they just came out and said it. And in that roundabout marketing speak, they are saying that not only was it bad in sales, but that it was unpolished, that they made mistakes and that they kind of shouldn't have released the game in the state that it was released. And they don't want to make the same mistake with Assassin's Creed Shadows, which, look, they've had a million chances before, but I guess we can still say better late than never. All of this comes at a time when Ubisoft is essentially in crisis. Their stock price is plummeting, there is internal turmoil, and a ton of reports of hostile takeovers still being a thing, which they have been for the last 10 years for Ubisoft. It's not good over there. Most of the things they've done have underperformed in one way or another and for one reason or another, and gamers have fundamentally decided that Ubisoft does not deserve our money, our attention, or our care, primarily, I would say, because they don't seem to respect us. There was also a leaked internal memo from Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot, which I had to wait a little to get it confirmed by multiple sources, but originally reported by Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming, in which he addresses the issues with Star Wars Outlaws and the desire for Assassin's Creed Shadows to not fail. Pretty big deal for the company. Makes it clear that they're placing the player first, which is really just them realizing that they need to do that in order for the company to survive. And also, very interestingly towards the end, addresses the controversy surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows by mentioning that it's not about pushing agendas, but about making games for the broadest audience possible, which there are many ways of interpreting, and I'll dig into that a little bit later. And now let's look at the reasoning for some of the assumptions and everything I just said, and the consequences of it, which could be incredibly severe. Let's start with what I said, that this decision seems incredibly rushed, and that's because this news, you might have blinked and missed it, but it started like 27 hours ago. There were some rumblings and then a confirmation that Ubisoft had cancelled their appearance at Tokyo Game Show. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like Gamescom in Cologne, or E3, if you remember what that is. But in Tokyo, which is kind of important since Assassin's Creed Shadows is set in Japan and Tokyo Game Show is very close to the launch, or what used to be the launch, of Assassin's Creed Shadows. But they were canceling, and initially people weren't really sure why, even though the most obvious answer would be that Assassin's Creed Shadow, as far as we know, has been received overwhelmingly negative over in Japan, and Ubisoft has been caught in more than one way trying to gaslight and fake apologize to Japanese people, so maybe they didn't feel that welcome. But the other potential reasons for this were, one, that hostile takeover taking up more time and urgency than showing up at TGS, and also just Assassin's Creed Shadows generally not being ready to be shown and probably in need of a delay or a rework, as some people had been rumoring around. Not long after, it was reported that there was a preview event set for the following week where all the content creators and journalists are normally flown out to some location and allowed to play the game, record some footage, follow some guidelines, go home, make a video, and give you a ton of previews on the embargo hour. And that event, which again, very big deal, was completely cancelled. And both of those things are huge red flags. Like, you can see them from space. You know when people say that because the review embargo for a game is on release day, that is a bad sign? I mean, it isn't always. Some incredible games have had embargoes very close to launch, but this was like that times 100. But the cancellation being so close to the actual show kind of confirms that this wasn't planned very well in advance. This was a last-minute decision, because if they knew a week or 2 weeks ago that they needed to delay Assassin's Creed Shadows, they would have cancelled TGS back then, and they would have also cancelled that preview event sooner, considering that a lot of people have tickets and planes to board, or different locations to be at, and calendars and schedules to follow. So while I can't tell you that it's 100% confirmed, I think it's a very rational conclusion to reach that they did this last minute. In a panic, you could say. Not to mention that those big preview events where they have to pay for all those flights and stuff for all of the journalists and content creators are normally accompanied by tons of sponsored posts and big marketing campaigns and trying to make all of the coverage appear at once. 130 previews go up on YouTube along with advertisements and sponsored stuff on TikTok, and that is a really big deal to all organize to just go, sorry guys, another time. Also, Ubisoft preview events tend to be more expensive than others because they like to fly people VIP to Disneyland. Sorry, I need to jab that in from time to time because it's a big deal. So in what we can only imagine is a state of panic around Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft decides to delay it. But what they had to have considered previously were some of the decisions that come with that delay. And this is where it's very important to remind you that Ubisoft stock is doing very badly, that there are investors calling for a ton of different decisions to be made within the company, and that they have been the target of a hostile takeover for many, many years over and over again. And within all of that and how poorly they are performing, they have still decided to move Assassin's Creed Shadows out of its November release date, which didn't have that much competition this year, to be honest, to February, a period of time where sales are considerably lower, and also in the last years has been actually pretty crowded. Now we can interpret this many ways, that's just how terrible the state of the game was. Ubisoft reprioritizing their game actually being finished and in a decent state instead of just selling it and we'll see what happens later. No matter the decision, it has cost them tremendously financially when they are already in a very precarious position. It changes their expected revenue for the rest of the fiscal year, it changes everything that you could imagine for them because this is their biggest launch in 4 years and basically what the entire company hinges on. So whatever the reasons may be, this wasn't a decision that could have been taken lightly and its consequences will be felt, specifically in the economic world where they are doing not well. However, there is still good news here, which is Steam on day one and no season pass means that Ubisoft has decided that Uplay is not the play. For those of you who haven't caught on, Ubisoft has been desperate for people to sign up for Uplay. And they do this with some very obvious marketing where they show you the game and they tell you, look, for $69.99 you get this very bad version of this game. You don't want the $69.99 version. Look over here, this is the $99.99 version that includes this deluxe edition jacket and this extra mission and also the first half of the season pass. But wait, we also have the $129 version of the game, which includes another jacket and the other half of the expansions. But hey, if that sounds like a lot of money, you could also just subscribe to Uplay Plus or whatever the name is, and you get all of this for the price of this subscription. Please come subscribe and please forget to cancel, which by the way, I signed up because I reviewed Star Wars Outlaws and I said, screw it, I'll leave it until Assassin's Creed. So I canceled that. If for any reason you were like me, remember to go cancel that. You're welcome. The other part of the Uplay scheme was that since they don't release on Steam day one, they frequently release years later sometimes, but normally 6 months or so later. If you wanted to play the game, you had to go through Uplay, and since you already had Uplay installed, why not just get the subscription and leave this launcher that you never wanted on your desktop? And by the way, the launcher isn't going away, as far as we know, but that would be an olive branch. That would be a show of good faith, Ubisoft. Just saying, just throwing that out there. But by taking away those season pass incentives and saying very clearly that they want everybody to enjoy the game at the same time on the 14th of February, and that it is launching day one on Steam, they're kind of saying, we're gonna move away from this sort of business plan that we had with Uplay and subscriptions. Even if not completely right off the bat, they are definitely shifting in another direction or exploring how to make money with the games in a different way, in my opinion, smarter way. And if you're wondering why they would do these things, is it because they have accepted the way things are now? Is it because they want to be friendly to their customers? I mean, yes, but only because they're desperate. They are desperate to make money. This is a way of them saying, if you read between the lines, we cannot have Assassin's Creed Shadows fail because this company is currently riding on this game. And they have been digging their own grave for so long that I truly wonder if it's just a little bit too deep and too late. But hey, they're trying to build a ladder. So this puts Ubisoft in a very, very bad spot. They are essentially up against the ropes, and if they weren't, we wouldn't have seen Shadows delayed this way. We wouldn't see them making the decisions that they're making. And I'm very sorry to remind Ubisoft that this is their bed and they are lying in it. People aren't against Assassin's Creed Shadows exclusively because of Assassin's Creed Shadows. It's because it's the match that's lighting the trail of gasoline that Ubisoft has been spreading for around the last 8 years. I mean, honestly, just this year we had the you need to get comfortable not owning games. They were the center of Stop Killing games because of The Crew, and hey, to their credit, they did announce that The Crew 2 and The Crew Motorfest were getting offline patches for the sake of preservation, which is really, we don't want to be involved in any of this, leave us alone. They released the first quadruple A game. They released Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is a great game. I'm getting tired of saying it. But then they said that it failed because people don't want that sort of game, when in reality it's because they did zero marketing for it or any sort of communication about it. So, a smidgen of gaslighting. Then they released a pretty mediocre Star Wars game that I have already said more than enough about. And on top of that, they have about 20 different controversies surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows, but that's just this year. You see, over the course of the previous years, Ubisoft went from an underdog that made excellent games and innovated within the AAA space to become an industry leader with things like Assassin's Creed 2 and Far Cry 3, and lived long enough to become the villain, you could say. As their open-world tower-climbing checklist game became a formula that became memes, and then eventually the memes stopped being funny, and they somehow kept sticking to the same formula and refused to meaningfully innovate or change their strategy, leading to more anti-consumer practices and worse games. And despite the fact that they've always had smaller projects that are interesting and cool, hey, Mario plus Rabbids are good games. I will get my XCOM wherever I can get it. Everything that has been big or mainstream by Ubisoft can be described as formulaic and greedy. So if you spend all of this time doing this, it really just takes that one spark to light the whole thing ablaze, and Assassin's Creed Shadows is that, including for decisions that they've made regarding that game, and as I mentioned, some of the issues that people in Japan have with it, along with a little bit more of gaslighting, including things that are not confirmed but that they were potentially involved in, like that New York Times piece claiming that all of the comments online from Japanese people were actually Westerners using Google Translate, which, in case you didn't know, Google Translate is the most advanced technology in the world, and it is actually impossible to decipher if somebody used that to write their comment out. And also, 100% of people in Japan are positive on every single creative decision of this game. Or at least that's what Ubisoft wants you to believe, instead of showing respect to people who are showing their concerns, often very respectfully, and wanting things to be different. I mentioned that specifically because I'm really tired of the gaslighting thing, but you probably know that there's about 50 other controversies surrounding this game. And this is the one game that they cannot afford to fail. It simply cannot. Like, honestly, their company is very much riding on this. Now, the interesting thing about the internal leaked memo from Yves Guillemot is that while it paints this picture of Ubisoft is in a really bad situation, like in case everything else didn't make it apparent, it's nice to get it straight from the horse's mouth. But the way that that memo presents this image of Ubisoft has been on the wrong track. We haven't been focusing on quality. We haven't been focusing on listening to players and giving them what they want is, in one way, very nice, and in another way, just kind of terrible, because they are, in a sense, accepting all of the terrible things they've done. They haven't done so publicly, which I think would go a long way to helping the image of this company, but they are, in a sense, admitting to a lot of the terrible things that they've done over the years, including that very important part of not listening to your customer base. And in a sense, it is at least comforting to see that the noise and the lack of sales and the voting with our wallets is actually taking effect. This puts them in a position where they have to change, which is kind of something that we've talked about a lot over the last months, that people are voting with their wallets, things are changing, and that matters. The other interesting part is that admittance of this is a company where we're not meant to endorse any specific agendas. Our goal is to create good games for the broadest audience possible. Now, you could interpret that last phrase as we're going to keep operating the same exact way we have because we believe that the creative decisions and the way that we address our customers is the way that we address the widest customer base possible. But that's why it's pretty ambiguous. I wouldn't blame anybody for also interpreting this as at least the perception that people have of the company, at the very minimum, is that we are hitching our horse to... Why are so many horses in this video? Why do I keep talking about horses? That we're betting it all on this one specific way of appealing to our audience, of pushing an agenda at least in the public's eyes, and we should move away from that because we are actually scaring away some of our customers. Which to me, as long as it means that they are willing to actively listen and change with the times as they go, is good, because at the end of the day, that should result in better games. And so they're in 100% panic mode. And what will come from that, I don't know. But let's look at the potential options real quick before we finish this video. Option 1. They delayed it, they lose money and are in an even worse situation because of that delay. The game comes out, and because it's only a 4-month delay, they can't really polish it up or address any of the bigger concerns surrounding the game. The game doesn't do very well financially, and from there, we don't know what happens with Ubisoft, but very probably in one way or another it crumbles. Be that a takeover, or be that a change of who is in charge and firing 60% of the staff and rebuilding the whole thing, or maybe just closing. Who knows how bad the financials truly get. Option 2. They release Assassin's Creed Shadows in February, and through one reason or another, or through some way that they escape this situation, they survive. And through that survival, they turn a new leaf. And with these small beginnings that they're taking, the small positive steps that they just announced for Assassin's Creed Shadows, they start to turn things around in these smaller areas and then start turning them around in the bigger areas. Maybe they even remember how to treat their customers right, and slowly they build back up and manage to survive. And hey, you know what? We all like to root for an underdog that accepts their mistakes, so anything could happen. And option 3 is really that, but more accelerated, just depending on the sales of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I will reiterate. I have come to the conclusion that this game is no longer too big to fail, and the general negative perception that people have had around the company and the game probably won't be salvaged by this 4-month delay. So really, if you're asking me personally what I think, which I am very aware that you did not ask me, but I'm going to tell you anyways, is somewhere between 1 and 2. Some of the gray in there, be that some small changes within the company, or some layoffs, or some restructuring, while still surviving and hopefully going on a better path, and then the story will be left as to be continued. But really, option 1 is actually looking very likely, and hey, if this is what it takes for people to wake up in the industry and realize that too big to fail doesn't exist and just seeing Ubisoft go under, that's really sad for a lot of the employees and people involved who care about what they do. But if it does have an effect on the industry, a positive one, at this point, so be it. I really am losing my patience, and giving Ubisoft chances is something that has me exhausted. Because that to me is the honest truth. They've been given so many chances. So many people have told them over the years what they need to do to fall back into the good graces of their own customer base, and they never do it. Again, you made your bed, you lie in it. But that is where we are at the moment, and it's a huge thing. It really is. We really could be witnessing the fall of one of the giants of video games, and if that doesn't show you just how much video games are changing, how much the landscape is changing, how much trends are morphing, I don't know what will. I didn't even mention Assassin's Creed Infinity in this video, which is a terrible thing, and I didn't get into the weeds into the controversies even. This video is long enough, I'm pretty sure. So really, I had a lot more to say about this entire topic since I have been on it for the last like 24 hours. About Ubisoft's game design and their trends and a lot of other bad practices that they've done and a ton more stuff, but I think that's enough. And if you enjoyed this video, if it was something that left you more informed and hopefully was entertaining, remember to hit the like button because that helps the channel grow. And if you like what I do, you can check out the channel. I do a ton of different things related to gaming. Consider subscribing. It would help a ton, and the channel's been growing a lot lately. I'm very happy about that. I must also come clean with you guys. About 6 months ago, I promised my girlfriend that I would cut my hair short when we reached 50,000 subscribers, because back then, that seemed like it would be impossible or years away. But here we are, so onwards to 50,000. Please subscribe. I'm saying this because once we get there, this is gonna look different. I'm not the smartest cookie in the cookie jar, but I am a man of my word, and I made a promise. Here I am, taking accountability in front of you, unlike Ubisoft. A very extra special thanks to all of my patrons on the $1 patron wall, which is called that way because there's only one tier, $1, but they support everything I do, and if you're interested in joining, you can find the link in the description below. And as always, thank you so much, truly, for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.